With us in studio, the man who led Barack Obama's 2012 re-election campaign, Jim Messina, Matt Gorman, Republican strategist, former NRCC communications director, and a key advisor to Tim Scott's presidential campaign. Great to have both of you here. So let's start, Jim, in Maricopa County, because it's been a center of disinformation. And Donald Trump, when he went to vote in Florida just a couple of hours ago, talked about it. Let's listen.
If they would use paper ballots, voter ID, proof of citizenship, and one-day voting, it would all be over by 10 o'clock in the evening. I'm hearing states where I'm up by a lot, but they won't have a final number for a long time. I'd like the Republicans to stay online. Democrats, if they'd like, they can leave. But I'd like the Republicans to stay online.
It's the one thing we haven't talked about, the impact of misinformation, in some cases flat out lies, not misinformation, but just lies. What are you watching for? Does it worry you? And do you think that the Harris campaign's ready for it?
I absolutely am worried about it. I chair a super PAC called Democracy Defenders that had to get involved in over 100 lawsuits in the past month. Disinformation, trying to get people off the ballot, trying to change early voting locations, all based on one thing. Well, actually, two things. One, trying to have less people vote, and two, to set up a legal fight for after the election in case Donald Trump loses. And you see him right there trying to sow discord, trying to sow dissent, saying, oh, I heard some things in this state and it's difficult. And what they're trying to do is set up a legal strategy after the election. It's incredibly cynical. It really does go to the base part of our politics, and I think it's wrong, but it's clearly what's going to have to, it's going to what happened. And, you know, we might know who won tonight or maybe a couple of days, but we're going to be in court for a while because of this kind of ridiculousness.
But we were in court for a while, you know.
But as you remember, that didn't turn out very well.
Yeah, and you know, I was in Pennsylvania until Saturday. Having said that, in the end, there were an awful lot of Republican governors, Republican secretaries of state.
That's right.
Who said, we are going to hold the line on democracy. So that's the positive part.
Including
of it, right?
Georgia's Brad Raffensperger. Right, absolutely.
Let me ask you about Georgia, Matt. There is talk from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution among Republicans. They're looking at the more conservative parts of the state, and they're giddy about the early vote turnout for those areas. Should they be giddy?
I think there's reason to be giddy, you know. But yes, no, we feel very good, I think, where things are going in a lot of those areas. The rural parts of the state are really coming out. We're monitoring African-American turnout, right? I think that is a key, both whether it's in Georgia, Michigan, Philly, and areas like that. I think that's one of the first things I'm going to be looking for on election night. But also like a county like, say, Cherokee County. That was a county that was a Mitt Romney county, 78% of the vote. He won it by 50%. Trump in 2020 just won it by just under 40%. Now, right, we talk about margins. You talked about there before. If, say, Democrats shrink that margin a little more, 35% or something like that, that would have an impact statewide. But if we grow it, we arrest that change, things would look good for us statewide there, too.
Jim Messina, let's talk about Pennsylvania, which we talked about earlier was going to be pivotal. What are you seeing so far out of Philly and out of the collar counties, where in Montgomery County and some of the other counties, Chester, which is becoming increasingly Democratic, where Harris has to do well, and where the thought was that women, suburban women, Democratic and Republican, would be motivated by reproduction rights.
Yep, I think it's exactly right, Andrew. And I just saw some numbers in a collar county, a collar city outside of Philly, already 50% turnout of what they thought they were going to get for the entire day by noon. And when you look at, people were sending me pictures, it's just women in the lines. I saw lines at Penn State University, which is one of the reasons Barack Obama won Pennsylvania twice. Historic numbers there. To your point, the youth voters were very, very big, and the numbers were already kind of where the Harris people want it to be. But in a very close race, I think we're both seeing exactly the same thing. Trump doing well in the rural areas, Democrats doing well in the suburbs, and the question is turnout in the cities. And so far, those numbers.
It's interesting. It does always come down to turnout every election.
It really does.
For a reason.
But let me ask, does the Trump ground game exist?
I think we're going to see a very interesting test case, because with the laws changing, a lot of...
And that's where Elon Musk, you know, his whole lottery, and it's still in dispute.
And other folks, too.
Where it's constitutional.
And other folks, too, right? There's a law that changed where you are allowed to bring some of the ground game out of your campaign and into these other entities, and you can coordinate legally with that. So I think that'll be a very interesting test case if this works. Do we see in the future if it doesn't work? maybe does some of it go back in house?
Matt, let me ask you about women. Should the Republicans be worried about women?
I mean, you could be saying that for any time between now and the last 5 years. But, the short answer is, of course. That's something that we've been looking at for a while.
Why such a male-focused campaign? I mean, why go full force on the Hulk Hogans and the Joe Rogans and the name-calling for Harris?
Well, the fact is, it's a battle of the gender gaps, right? If we do better with men than Democrats do with women, we win, and vice versa for Democrats. So there's a calculation made. Rather than try and arrest some of the slide with women, do we try and increase the margins with men? I think that's going to be the massive test case.
There are more women voters in the country than men, so isn't that a losing calculation?
Well, it depends who they vote for, but I think the other part is also where they are, and I think
Jim
that
wants
is
to
where.
jump in.
Yeah, look, this is just two different campaigns.
Yeah.
They are trying to, as Matt said exactly right, jack up male turnout. The Democrats are trying to do two things: jack up women turnout, and then have a real big strategy on the ground to do both. Trump has decided he's going to give his campaign to Elon Musk on the ground. Democrats tried that in 2004 for John Kerry, tried to do an independent thing. It doesn't work. And the reason why it doesn't work is because volunteers and supporters want to talk to a person on the campaign. They want to talk to someone who's coordinated. You can't move messages as well. It's a huge gamble, one that we made the mistake of doing, and we won't do it again.
But Jim, let me just nail down this business about turnout and ground campaign.
Yes, ma'am.
Because the whole argument from the Harris campaign, that's why she spent all day in Pennsylvania, that hasn't happened before, with all those stops in Pennsylvania, is that they had to motivate the turnout, the election day turnout.
That's right.
And they were counting on all the door knocking, going twice, 3 times to some homes, especially in Philadelphia.
Yep.
So is there any sign that that's working?
Absolutely. The numbers I just said to you, huge Philly turnout so far. Half of their vote already in Collier County by noon. Jen O'Malley, from the very first day of the Harris campaign, said we're going to build the biggest army in the history of American politics for Election Day, and today they're showing that muscle.